All right, welcome back to Hacker Slacker. This week it's me, Jacob Petticord, and
Me, Andre Garive.
we're going to be your hosts today. We're going to start with a little follow up from last week. Something that I noticed when I downloaded the release version of iOS 12 is that they moved the clock from the middle of the screen out to the sides, like it is on the new versions of iOS on the phone. Which this is like, it might sound like a small thing, but the reason I think it's interesting is because when they did that on the iPhone, it was because they wanted to put the notch there. So I'm wondering if that's probably what they're going to be doing with the iPads later this year.
Yeah, I honestly think that a bezel-less display with a notch would probably look the best on an iPad. Um, I really like the way the iPhone 10 looks, but I think with a bigger screen, it would make the iPad experience a lot better, especially with smaller bezels.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because when you think about the way you hold a phone versus an iPad, I feel like sometimes you do grip that side portion of it, but just the look of it would be amazing with like low bezels and the iPhone X style.
For sure. And I know that Apple is really good with detection of when your hand is there and it shouldn't be. I know the palm detection on my MacBook is really great, so I'm sure they would be able to deal with that.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting choice because no matter where they put it, if they put it at the top, I guess that'd probably be the best, the top in like portrait mode, because if you have it, I don't know, the iPad's not really like the phone where it's only used mainly in one orientation. So having that notch, like it would be kind of on either side or top or bottom, depending on the way you're holding it. But it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, I would be really interested to see if they took the fingerprint sensor out and just used Face ID. I think that's a really good way to implement the notch is to give Face ID to an iPad because that's something that you don't need Touch ID quite as much on that because with the iPhone 10, I know I've said this earlier, but I can't really unlock the phone just grabbing it off the side of my bed. I have to hold it up to my face. Whereas an iPad, you pretty much need to be holding it to be using it anyway. So I think having the Face ID on that would also be pretty nice.
That's true. Another thing to note is that you can already use the iPad fully with gestures without the home button. Like you could use the iPhone X, so like you can just swipe up from the bottom. I'm doing it right now on mine to go back to the home screen. So they really wouldn't have to make too many. They wouldn't have to make any software changes to get it there. So
Yeah, I use an iPad Mini, and iOS 12 isn't like great on the iPad Mini. It's better than previous iOSs, obviously, but I think bezel-less iPad with just a notch would work really nicely with iOS.
yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do later this year.
All right, let's get into the news. So the first story that we've got today is that the co-founders of Instagram are stepping down from Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah, so when I was reading up on this, it said that they were leaving for creative differences in kind of the direction that Facebook was pushing them. Obviously, Facebook is pushing a lot of ads on them. We've seen the amount of ads on Instagram skyrocket since they acquired. I feel like every third post is an ad now.
Absolutely.
But I think one of the big things that they were disagreeing on was that I don't know. The Wall Street Journal article I read said that they felt like Facebook was pushing Instagram adopters towards Facebook and away from Instagram, kind of trying to um, almost cannibalizing their users. So like if you shared an Instagram link on Facebook, it would no longer like say that this link was from Instagram. Like they were just doing a bunch of little things that were causing differences within the companies, like just causing strife between them. And this is a story we've seen before. I think the WhatsApp founders left Facebook earlier this year, so it's nothing really new that founders are of these big companies are leaving Facebook once they get merged in. But it's definitely something to note, and it'll really be interesting to see what those guys do next.
Yeah, they really created an amazing app in Instagram, so I'm excited to see what they do next. It said in the New York Times article that we'll link in the show notes that they are going to take a little break and then they're going to work on something else. So I'm really excited to see if maybe that'll be maybe a social network that collects a lot less data, is more secure. Maybe it'll be some other mobile app. Who knows? But I think it'll be really good.
Yeah, it definitely makes you wonder where the next social networks are going with those two out working on something new again. It's really interesting the way that they work. They kind of work as a team, so they founded Instagram together. People said if one of them was going to leave Facebook, they were both going to leave. So it's cool to see them doing their thing.
Yeah. So our next story is that the $400 million acquisition of Shazam for Apple is finally through. So Apple now owns Shazam and will be able to integrate their technologies.
Yeah, this was a move that made sense for both companies because a lot of Shazam's revenue was from referral links with Apple. So, like, if you Shazam a song in a store and you want to purchase a song on iTunes or review it on Apple Music, when you click on that link in Shazam, that's how Shazam gets a lot of their revenue. They also have a lot of data that they sell in terms of like what's hot, like what music people like, and then they sell that to like retailers. So when you hear like indie songs in Starbucks or something like that, a lot of times they're getting that data from Shazam on what songs are like really resonating with their types of customers.
Yeah. 2 points on this. Shazam kind of seems like an app that was useful 5 years ago, but kind of has to be integrated at this point, where it's like you just say, "Hey Siri, what song is playing?" I just activated my phone. um,
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure if you do that right now, it does use Shazam the way it is. It's an integration, but now it'll be. I wonder if they'll just stop saying Shazam. I mean, no one really uses that app by itself anymore,
yeah,
so it does make sense that they're just kind of merging it in the Siri.
yeah, it seems like a good way for Shazam to get it out now and not have to worry about failing now that they're under Apple. And another thing is that Apple has really pushed into audio in the last like 4 years. Ever since they acquired Beats and then debuted Apple Music, they've kind of reshaped iTunes and how the Apple Music and audio works. So it's really interesting to see this go in, and maybe they'll include Shazam features in some sort of AirPods or Beats product.
Yeah, I think it's been cool to see the way Apple's been trying to compete with Spotify with Apple Music. They kind of started by acquiring Beats Music and using their head of design to design the new Apple Music, and now with the Shazam acquisition, it'll be cool to see what they do with their like recommendation technology. See if they make improve their playlists that they recommend for you or that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Do you use Spotify or Apple Music?
I use Apple Music, and that's just because of the way my family plan works. So all my family has iPhones, and decided we were paying for both for a while, and we decided this is ridiculous. Like we need to just pick one, and
Yeah.
Apple Music ended up winning out.
Yeah, I use the student version of Spotify Premium, so I get Hulu and Showtime with it, which is just something I don't really want to give up. Um, so unless I find another way to get Hulu, I'll probably be sticking with Spotify for
Yeah, the
the
one
time
thing
being.
I miss about Spotify is the playlist recommendations. They were so good on Spotify, and I just don't really find anything that I like on Apple Music.
Yeah, I really like Spotify too because I can share my playlists with people who don't have Spotify Premium, and then they can just use that. They can listen to it on shuffle, which is
Yeah.
really nice. Whereas Apple Music is so cut off from you either subscribe or you don't.
Yep.
All right, and then the final article I have for us today is it was reported today about an hour and a half ago that Elon Musk is being sued by the SEC over his funding secured tweet.
Yeah.
So
That was definitely a pretty special moment in 2018 when Elon Musk tweeted that he had secured funding to take Tesla private at $420. The internet wasn't really sure what to make of it. The stock market wasn't really sure what to make of it. The stock ended up jumping, and turns out the funding was not secured. And now, of course, he's under a lot of trouble because people made financial decisions based on his tweet.
yeah,
And I mean, legally, that's a valid way for him to disclose information to the public. There was actually a case about that a few years ago. So he's probably in some pretty deep water on this one.
yeah, they're suing him for securities fraud, and they want to bar him from ever holding office or director positions at a publicly traded company, and then also pay damages. So
That is bold.
Elon Musk, you flew too close to the sun.
Yeah, I guess if the only thing that would make it worse is if they showed that he sold off a bunch of his shares right when he drove the price up.
Oh man, yeah. If he was trading in that time, that would just be awfully stupid.
Yeah.
But I'm sure this will play out for the next 2 years or so,
Yeah, this doesn't strike me as something that we're going to find out what happens next week.
unless he just decides to settle, pay off, and get rid of his public board
Yeah, we'll
work.
see.
All right. So that should be pretty interesting. All right, Jacob, you want to talk about what our main topic for today will be?
Yeah, so our main topic for today is I'm calling it iPhone compulsiveness or just phone compulsiveness because I've found that in any time where my brain is left alone to think recently, I've just been reaching for my phone. So whether that's going to check Instagram stories or Snapchat stories, refresh Instagram, go to Hacker News, listen to a podcast, like even when I'm in the shower, I just don't have time to myself anymore because I'm just constantly feeding myself content. That's YouTube too, and all of these platforms, especially YouTube, they're really engineered to like keep your engagement, keep you interacting with them. So if you're watching a YouTube video, they don't just let you get away after you watch one. It's like, oh, here's some recommendations and that sort of thing. And I think it started to affect like the way I pay attention in class and just even like the qualities of ideas I'm having. So like I used to like have ideas for apps I wanted to make or things I wanted to work on all the time, and now it's just like I feel like my brain just doesn't have any room to think anymore, and so I've done some things to kind of deal with it. Like made some changes to the apps on my phone, set some rules for myself, and that's kind of what I want to talk about today. It's interesting because this all actually came from a conversation I heard on a different podcast, Cortex, where one of the hosts was talking about the same things, and it just totally resonated with me in a big way. And I just found that this is something that I feel like I need to work on myself, and it would probably lead to me being more thoughtful in my life and prioritizing what really matters.
Yeah. One thing that came with iOS 12 is screen time.
Yep.
So I'm actually looking at my screen time on my iPhone right now, and yeah, this is crazy just looking at it. Today, I've already been on my phone for an hour and 43 minutes, and it's 5 p.m.
5 p.m. Yep.
So that's ridiculous, honestly. And it says that last week I spent about 3.5 hours a day on my phone.
On average.
On average.
Yep.
And over 7 days, I spent 12 hours and 13 minutes on social networking apps.
What's your one of the interesting ones is pickups per hour.
Mm.
That's how many times you like check your phone in a given hour, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, I have 142 pickups per day.
Oh, per day. If you switch to the today's section, it'll show you.
All right. I have 5 pickups per hour.
5 pickups per hour. That's what I'm at too. And then how many notifications? That's an interesting one.
Today I've had 127 notifications.
Yep, I'm at 150. That's 26 emails, which I mean, as a student, I feel like there's not much you can do about those. You just get all this stuff from the universities, but
yeah, I'm looking at my mine from the past 7 days. In the past 7 days, I had 1,422 notifications.
Yep.
Around 203 per day.
Jeez, that's like twice as many as me.
Yeah. 500 Snapchats, 230 group messages, 150 texts, 132 news articles, 116 from ESPN, Canvas, which is our like student software thing. I have 76, and then my clock 53. I set a lot of alarms and timers for naps and stuff in the middle of the day.
So one of the things I found is that even if it's not you just having a time to think and you're picking up your phone, it could be like you're sitting in class and you're relatively engaged, and then you get a notification and it takes you down a tangent, and then all of a sudden the Notes app is no longer open on my iPad. I'm just like browsing around, not really paying attention in class. So that's definitely one of the things I tried to do is cut down on my notifications, which is something that was actually a big improvement in iOS 12. Not only do they group notifications, but you can force touch on notifications in Control Center and just disable them from that app from there. So I actually have like a pretty tight group of apps that's actually allowed to send me notifications. I think it's only like 5 or 6 apps can actually do it.
I'm very compulsive in clearing my notifications.
Yep.
So I keep my notifications very clear. But another great thing about iOS 12 is that you can turn on Do Not Disturb for a set amount of time. So you can it will go into your calendar. I use Google Calendar, but it automatically updates to my Apple account's calendar. So it'll say, oh, hey, you have this class from 1:30 p.m. to 3:20 p.m. Would you like me to turn off notifications until you're out of this class? So that's what I do, is whenever I go to a class, I just turn on Do Not Disturb until the end of that class. Or maybe if I'm at game or something, I'll do it until I leave the location or
Yep.
until the next morning or whatever.
Yeah, that's definitely smart. So, a big way that I ended up kind of forcing myself out of these habits, because I just kind of wanted to break the cycle of, I have a spare second to myself, like I could think, or I could just open up Instagram, stare at some photos. So, one of the things I did was I'll show you my phone screen. I have 3 rows of apps now that are outside the dock. I deleted Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, so those are no longer on my phone. If someone tells me about something on Instagram, I can still use the browser, but I'm not allowed to check it. And I kept Snapchat just because that's the way a lot of my group messages are sent. So I'm trying to Snapchat less, and then I'm also not checking those stories. So a lot of the things that I'm trying to cut down on are kind of what I would call filler content, and that can come in a lot of forms. So like the Snapchat stories are definitely feels like filler content to me. Instagram stories, a lot of Instagram posts and Twitter stuff that I was following. Like I would tell myself that it was for news, but I can seek out that news by myself most times, and I don't really need it just there all the time, just constantly dumping information in my brain.
Yeah.
Like, it's bad when you check Twitter, refresh it, you're at the top of the timeline, you close out of it, you're like, oh, what should I do now?
And you
check Twitter again,
yeah.
refresh it again, and you're like, I was just here. And like, you can just tell that our brains just get stuck in these loops, and I just do not think that it can be good for us. So I'm just kind of trying to hit the reset button a little bit and kind of evaluate the way I'm using my phone.
Absolutely. I'm looking at my most used apps. Facebook is number 1 at 5 hours and 23 minutes a week, and Snapchat is 3 hours and 40 minutes a week. So I obviously spend most of my time on Facebook and Snapchat.
Yep.
It would be Twitter, but when I was in San Francisco, I accidentally got locked out of my Twitter account, and I'm still locked out.
Oh, geez.
So thanks to GDPR, I had made my account before I was 13, so it told me that I was not 13, and it locked me out. They're on a blanket ban right now because they haven't cared to fix it.
Yikes.
So I have not used Twitter in 2.5 weeks, which is pretty good for me, honestly, because I probably would have a much higher number on Twitter if I didn't. But that's just pushed me to use Facebook more.
Yeah.
And I still open Twitter several times. I'm sure I could find how much time I've spent on Twitter the last few. I've spent a minute on Twitter, just looking at the screen that says I was locked out of my account.
Just compulsively opening it. Yeah.
It is on my dock, so that is one of the things that I should probably change.
And do you check it, Instagram and Snapchat stories a lot?
Yeah. I'm very, very compulsive about notifications, and that includes having unwatched stories, having Facebook notifications I have completely muted because sometimes I'll get a ton of them.
Those are garbage.
They send really poor notifications,
Yeah.
but I still have the in-app notifications.
Yep.
So I'll check Facebook and I'll clear out those notifications, and then I'll check Facebook 10 minutes later and I'll clear out maybe one notification that I got, even though I could easily check it 3 hours later and nothing would matter.
I feel like Facebook's crazy because a lot of times I feel like they're making notifications just when you have none. So it's like if you clear your notifications in a few minutes, they'll give you another one that they probably generated because they saw you don't have any to look at that moment. And what's crazy is since I deleted the app, they must be able to see that their notifications aren't delivering because now they're sending me emails about all the notifications I would be getting if I had the app installed. It's like crazy. So do you use YouTube? Like, do you follow YouTube channels, like stay up to date and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I use YouTube pretty often.
Okay. Like how many hours a week do you think you watch?
Well, this tells me I spent an hour on YouTube on my phone.
Yeah.
This past 7 days. I also watch on either my laptop or my computer or my PlayStation.
Yep. So one of the problems I felt like with YouTube was I followed so many channels that it was almost just like a bottomless pit of content. Like every time I came, it was like I could find something to watch. So my solution to this was kind of just to cut down on the number of channels, like cut back just to the core ones that I want to watch every single episode of and where it's like a reasonable amount, and then turn on notifications for the app and then hide it deep in a folder somewhere. So I can't just like go to my home screen, open up YouTube, refresh subscriptions and keep checking. Like I know that if there's a new video, I'll get a notification and it'll sit in my notifications. I don't have to like constantly be checking it because like I already know if it's there or not.
Yeah, that actually sounds like a pretty good idea. I don't use folders on my
Really?
phone, which makes it harder for me to find applications, honestly, because half of the notifications are like things I might need at some point. Applications like Google Drive, I don't use it on my phone all that much. I have Discord on my phone. I honestly don't use Reddit all that much, so it's on like the third page.
Reddit was another one I had to remove from my phone too, because that's talk about like an empty pit of content. You can just keep going there
that
forever.
Is completely endless.
And, like, gain nothing.
Yeah, and then I have just a bunch of apps. I just feel really bad deleting apps because then I'll always end up re-downloading them.
Yeah.
So I kind of know where the apps I use the most are. Like I've got on my dock, I have a podcast app, messages, Twitter, and Snapchat. So
mine's kind of similar. It's all communication. So my dock, I have Snapchat, GroupMe, messages in my phone.
Yeah, and then on my first page, I have Chrome, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Those are my top 4. And then I have settings. That's important. Gmail. I check my email constantly. I could probably find. I spent 28 minutes in the last 7 days just looking at the email app.
Do you get notifications for email, like when a new one comes in?
Anything that comes to my primary inbox,
okay.
I do.
Interesting. Yeah. I get notifications for all my email, and it's good because, like, if I get, like, a useless newsletter email that I can't unsubscribe from, I can literally from my watch just, like, tap archive, and then I'd never have to, like, actually see it or spend time addressing it.
I have my email pretty heavily filtered.
Yeah.
So
that's nice.
It's pretty good. And then I have my calendar, Google Calendar, super useful.
Yeah, sometime we need to talk about the way we manage, like, what we need to do, like to-do lists and calendars and stuff. I love talking
future
about
episode
that.
There. Spotify, that just gotta have my music. Lyft, I spent my summer in the Bay Area, so Lyft was a lot more important than it is here now that I have my car here.
Yeah.
Then FaceTime and phone, just pretty easy to have there. I have a tuner. I'm a musician, so I have a tuner on my front page.
Nice.
My banking app, Google Maps, camera, photos, reminders, Canvas, the student thing, calculator, news, weather, App Store, GroupMe, and ESPN.
Yep.
So pretty important apps to have up front, but a lot of these I probably spend way too much time on.
The other thing I found was podcasts, which is kind of ironic because obviously I want you to listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
But I found I was kind of using podcasts in a way that was like anytime there was like silence, just put on a podcast, listen to it, and then it's like just preoccupying your brain to the point where like you're not really thinking about anything, you're not really paying too much attention to what you're listening to, and just kind of zoning out. And I was doing that, like, I don't know, I was listening to a lot of podcasts. I would be curious to see like how many hours of podcasts I used to listen to a week, but my solution to that was to just try to cut down, similar to YouTube, cut down the quality or quantity so that my like new podcast list is pretty much always empty. Like I'm very like the ones that I want to listen to, I'll listen to them and then get them out of there, but there's no like just endless feed of other podcasts that I listen to sometimes that I can go in and check.
Yeah, I usually like to listen to a full podcast at a time, or at least a good chunk. So I usually don't listen to a podcast unless I know that I have at least 15 minutes to be listening to it. Although when I am in the car, I pretty much always am listening to podcasts. Yeah. So I'll drive. We're at the university in Lincoln. My family lives on the south side of the city. So I'll drive home maybe once a week, once every other week or so. And that's about 20 minutes podcast that I just listen to. Yep.
Yeah, I listen to podcasts like on my AirPods usually like throughout the day. So it'll be either that or music.
I do listen when I'm walking around campus, put in the AirPods, just double tap the left one, plays whatever I was listening to last, which is usually the podcast I'm on.
Yeah. I mean, surprise, surprise. We both listen to podcasts, which is why.
Yeah, shocking. Yeah, so what are your most used apps now that you've kind of been on this digital diet?
Yeah, Messages is most used, 2 hours in the last 7 days, and then Safari, GroupMe, Notability, which is interesting. This must like merge with my iPad usage as well, and then Outlook, my emails, 30 minutes, music, Snapchat, still YouTube, and then my to-do list app. Those are like my top ones. Yeah, so your top one actually takes about as much time as my third to fourth one. So yeah, hopefully I'm doing all right on this then. I definitely like some weak points I've found is I would just keep a tab open with Instagram on it and then like, check to see if I had any notifications that way. It's like, okay, you're like totally just defeating the purpose of what you were trying to do, you know?
Yeah. So we both use iPhones.
Yeah.
So obviously iOS, and we have this screen time app, and we have a lot of different controls we can have. But Android Pie for Pixel has a digital well-being. Um, it's very similar to screen time. It essentially tells you what's going on, how you're spending your time, all that kind of stuff. So I do not have a Pixel, and neither do you, but I'm sure that it is very similar. And I think you can actually set amounts of time that you can spend on an app, and then it'll just kick you out. And I think that would probably be good for me for apps like Facebook and YouTube. Probably Instagram the most, because I spend so much idle time looking at Instagram. Facebook, I have groups that are really important that I'm a part of, and I see family news and that kind of stuff. But Instagram, nothing important really comes out of Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice. It's usually nice stuff that you're looking at. You know, it's not like Twitter or stuff where a lot of times it's like nasty, like political content. But it really, I don't know. For me, it's just when you're trying to be more intentional about the way you're using your time, like a bottomless pit of algorithmically served photos that make you feel nice is probably like not my top priority for what I want to be doing. And this isn't to say like all of a sudden I'm like 10 times more productive because I'm not staring at Instagram. I really don't think it's led to like me getting more homework done or having more time for other things too much. But hopefully what it's actually doing is improve, like rebuilding my attention so I can get better at reading, get better at really sticking with it through the entire class period. And just like impulsivity in general. Have you noticed issues with any of those things?
I definitely am an impulsive phone checker.
Yeah. I think that's just the way a lot of people are, and a lot of people accept it as not that big of a problem. And I didn't either until I just started to notice it in other areas of my life where like I said, it got hard to read or pay attention in class, or I was acting impulsive in like other areas of my life. And I just kind of feel like, I don't know, like I'm not going to get into mindfulness meditation or anything, but just kind of having more control over what I'm feeding my brain and trying to get better results from the way it's acting, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Obviously, all this, like, these algorithms serving us content and these bottomless pits, it's not like what our brains were made for, and everyone knows that, but it feels good, I guess, and it's like we haven't really proven that it's hurting us in any meaningful way, so there's no real reason to like completely cut yourself off, but it's just something that I think about a lot.
Yeah, I think digital well-being will become a very hot topic in the next few years, especially as devices get even more widespread, even easier to use, even nicer looking, all that kind of stuff.
Even more integrated into your life. Like, I mean, I keep going back to the glasses, but I mean, if you have a screen that's always on in the corner of your vision, like talk about like screen time, like that'd be crazy. So that's one of the things that interests me. Circling back around, tying it all together with the Instagram or co-founders leaving Facebook, is I want them to kind of go on and start the next social network, which hopefully is moving in a more attention sensitive direction, where instead of they're just trying to get all the attention they can because they're a startup and they want that viral growth and they got to make the VCs happy, they're trying to like kind of be more respectful of people's time and do what's good for people and not necessarily for the VC investors and for themselves, you know?
Yeah. I think what's interesting is we've reached an age where the first social networks, the scrappy companies that just kind of blew up, are now mature companies. We've got Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, the three giants, and even Snapchat, where they are big companies. But they came out in a time where we weren't really thinking about anything besides, oh, look at this cool app.
Yeah, I almost think of it like when we invented cars, we wanted them to go really fast and we were burning all this fossil fuel. But now that we've been doing it for a while, we're kind of starting to see the effects that they have, and we're trying to shift over to cleaner energy with companies like Tesla and stuff. I kind of want the Tesla of social networks, where they've taken the effects that we're seeing on ourselves and like just radically trying to drastically change the world like for the better like that.
Absolutely. I think that it will be a very innovative space, but I also think that a lot of people are going to say, oh, we already have Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat. Why do we need another social media platform?
It is an incredibly hard problem to solve. Anything that involves networks, where Facebook already has a network of a third of the world's population, it's going to be so hard to displace any of these guys, and then also to resist getting bought by them like we saw Instagram did.
And I think another thing about especially Facebook is it's always able to crash and burn. Not the company as a whole. They've got very well put investments. They're a very diverse company. They know what they're doing when it comes to the business. But when it comes to their technology and avoiding regulation or being shut down, or even maybe they get hacked and they lose their service. I don't know how, but it is a giant that could fall. And I think if Facebook falls, it'll fall hard, and a lot of things will fall with it. And that's going to be a huge problem, but also a huge vacuum for a new social network.
Yeah, on the topic of Facebook's fall, it was interesting over the summer. Since I was working at a stock exchange, I was kind of watching the stocks more closely. And when Facebook had their earnings call, they dipped about 20% in a single day, which was like the most market cap loss of any company in history.
They lost like 3 full Twitters or something.
Yep. So it was just absolutely ridiculous. I think it was like $120 billion or something off their stock, right? And my thought process was, Mark Zuckerberg is going to get that money back. So I bought some Facebook stock, and it continued to drop past that, and it's just now about $10 below where I bought it at the bottom of that giant drop. So there's definitely other people who are seeing the same issues we see with Facebook and kind of concerned about its longevity with all this new talk about
regulation,
well-being and that kind of thing.
Which is interesting because that just kind of shows investors don't care about users.
Yep.
And so a company, therefore, shouldn't really care about users. But when you're a company that has such a pull that you have influence over a third of the world's population, you have to care about users.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're an investor, you're a venture capitalist investor, you're investing in probably 100 different companies, you need one of them to be $100 million, billion-dollar company. How are they going to do that? If they're a social network that survives off ads, well, each user is not super valuable. They're going to need a lot of users. So they have to get as many users as they can on their platform for as long as they can. And, I mean, that's just the way the incentives are lined up. So it'll be interesting to see if someone can figure out a social network business model that doesn't involve advertising and doesn't involve keeping you on your phone as much as it involves keeping you happy and happy with the product.
Absolutely. It does seem, though, that you either have to advertise or collect data and sell it in order to actually make money. Unless it comes from a company that's so big, so well-funded, so already profitable that they don't need to worry about a social network. But that would have to mean a company outside of tech that is well-established has to innovate in tech where they aren't. And that seems almost impossible.
Yep. I mean, I'm just hoping there's some good business model or innovation. I don't want to see Google try to invent another social network because they're definitely, they've tried that probably 50 times at this point. And I don't know, their focus is definitely in the ad revenue side of things. So.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we got a little bit off of the topic, but anything else on phone compulsiveness?
I think that about wraps up the problem I was having and what I'm doing now to address it. It's definitely interesting. Like, if you're listening to this right now and thinking there's some, like, I can kind of identify with what they're saying, I would definitely listen to the 2 most recent episodes of Cortex, the podcast that I heard about this first on, because they've had some pretty interesting discussions on it, and one of the co-hosts is, like, pretty much removing himself from the internet entirely, so it's interesting to, like, hear his journey as he's doing it too. So I would definitely recommend following that podcast as well if this kind of stuff interests you.
All right. So check out Cortex, and we will see you next week.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Bye.